Welcome to Native Calgarian and Mossy for listening. I'm your host, Michelle Robinson, speaking to you in Mohkinstsis in the Blackfoot Confederacy, home of the Niitsitapi, Tsuut'ina Dene, and the Yiharhi Nakota. I talk about history, current news, unheard news, book clubs, with special guests to give local or national issues a voice through an urban Satu Dene lens. My life's work will be to honor the voices of my ancestors and next generation with humor, love, and truth. Reconciliation is work, not performance. May we honor all Indigenous voices with that courage. Today is September 21st, 2024. Welcome to Native Calgarian. If you enjoy hearing Indigenous content by this Satu Dene woman, my Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you to my previous donors for already showing your report or your support. If you cannot afford to give, I'd just love to hear from you. You can email me at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or your questions. Also, giving a review helps, whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. Go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And always remember to share things you learn to your network. Oki, Naganiko Mekoche Chestakomaki, Nara Dago de Dakots Nagotine Siku Saradi. Hi, my name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use they, them pronouns. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11 in Delaney. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene nation is uninvited to this area of Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many big dog town, named after the Calgary Stampede, because we call all our horses big dogs. I was born in Calgary, or in Blackfoot, Mohkinstsis, as Michelle Elliott, an English name that has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. Acknowledging proximity to whiteness is important because the darker the skin, the more racism a person experiences in colonial spaces. My late great-grandfather is Milo B. Wolf from Delaney. His daughter, Alice, is my now late great granny. No, she's not my great granny. She's my late granny. My mother and I are Satu Dene, or Northern Slavey Dene, but my Indian Act imposed status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. Through my father, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution. Having a Canadian Indian Act imposed status card is a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. Indigenous Two-Spirit, or the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ plus community, and Indigenous women are at the bottom of the Canadian socioeconomic ladder because of colonial trauma, imposed poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. According to the 2023 Quality of Life report from the Calgary Foundation, 31% of racialized Calgarians cannot find suitable employment. And you can look that up at the Calgary Foundation. I am not a social worker, nor an elder, nor do I speak on behalf of all Indigenous, but I share my story as a Dene mom navigating this colonial, misogynistic, urban, racist world in 2024. As a trauma-informed Dene woman who attempted to run, join harmful colonial parties, spent money to be at expensive conventions, left my home to travel to those conventions just to vote on incomplete policies that still allow for the colonial incarceration and killing, a denial of justice, denial of health services, racism, colonial trauma, and genocide of Indigenous and Black peoples. I have worked to continue, reports to advocate for, and attempt to work within these systems meant to harm me and my community. I think of all of this today, and I hope we honor the many Indigenous lives lost for this colonial so-called country named Canada. I hope you see your role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see your role in reconciliation as a treaty partner. Pride Month should never be 1 month. It's important to understand that the straight agenda and gendered violence was and is forced on these lands by Christian outsiders. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring your treaty partner or the host as a guest and acknowledging your role as that treaty partner in a so-called time of reconciliation. Can they be performative? Absolutely. It's important that acknowledgements have meaning. Otherwise, you're just creating more harm. I encourage all to introduce themselves with an acknowledgement of their ancestors, stories of displacement, how you perceive your role as a treaty partner, a citizen of Canada, a refugee, or other land displacement. If you don't know how to pronounce your local Indigenous nation's name, won't say your pronouns, won't say your story of origin, won't acknowledge stolen lands, won't acknowledge imposed economic oppression or your role in reconciliation, I determine how safe you are to be around my community, my family, and myself, because we face the most colonial violence based on ignorance or worse, willful anti Indigenous biases. Understanding land acknowledgements and their importance is Indigenous 101 because it immediately addresses colonialism, oppression dynamics, broken treaties, and lies taught today in Canadian schools nationally. That's why settlers and those who call themselves Native Calgarians or whatever town you're from show me that you have no Indigenous 101 understanding. Jesse Winty's book, Unreconciled, explains this perfectly, as do many other Indigenous authored books. Land Back is a movement that could save the planet from climate change created by colonialism, but it would be a part of a treaty partnership, part of meaningful reconciliation, and honoring global initiatives like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. As a former geomatics drafter, I'd love to teach you more, but you have to pay me. Go to nativecalgarian.com for more. I want to welcome my guest today. Toni, would you like to introduce yourself in your way?
So honestly, as a 60s scoop, I'm a little intimidated, but I will try. So, okay, Tonse, my name is Pisimoyapi Esqueo, which is a rainbow woman gifted to me by Elder Patrick DeJolt. I am from Treaty 8. I am Mikisew Cree is the one who claims me. My mom was Marina Ratfat. Unfortunately, she passed away due to domestic violence and the trauma from residential school. I myself am a 60 scoop survivor, and a part of the missing and murdered Indigenous women. I gave my own testimony in 2018 because my Auntie Helena went missing in the 70s. She was never found. My mom was found in an alley, that she was frozen to death and beaten. And because she succumbed to the elements, they didn't consider it murder. Myself, I grew up out on the streets of Edmonton from a very young age and dealt with addiction, homelessness, loss of identity, loss of culture, loss of everything. Multiple times I could have not been around anymore. Thank God I'm here today. Thank Creator for allowing me another day and another breath.
Yeah.
I am a visitor on Mohkinstsis Treaty 7, and I honor that always and forever, time immemorial. Um, yes, and so my government name is Toni Jarvis, but my birth name that my mom gave me, which I found out later, was Marie Antoinette, and it was my mom's name was Marina, and her mom's name was Marie. So it was like my birthright that was taken from me as a child because I got adopted. And it's a long story, but we can get into that later. So that's a little bit about me and who I am. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think it's fantastic. So thank you for coming and sharing this and talking about these traumas. Always find it interesting how many Canadians just don't understand the gravity of what you just
Mhm.
said.
Mhm.
I know right now that there is a push for folks like yourself who may want to name themselves back to Maria Antoinette, that you could, but
Marie.
it's
Yeah.
so much. It's so
It's
much.
a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And for me, what I struggle with is the stereotypes, and there's two always, is that there is, and pardon me for saying this, but it's the drunken Indian or the very spiritual. And
Yeah,
I really struggle with those stereotypes
yep,
being indigenous, is that I'm not a language keeper. I didn't get stuff passed down to me because the system, it was meant to break our family down, and it did.
it did.
And
No,
so those teachings that sometimes come to us through, our family members or this way of life, where I don't have that, right?
yep. I feel you
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had connection with my mom in my entire life, but my family was very colonized. I actually recently found out. So my grandfather and my granny, both passed away about a year ago, and
Oh,
yeah, so we found out through that this entire time my grandpa was status, and he
mhm.
had lied to say he
Yeah.
wasn't so that he could work in the mines up in Yellowknife.
Mhm.
And because at that
Mhm.
time they weren't allowing natives to work up there. Yeah. So it was funny because my entire life I thought I was a C-31, but it turned
Mhm.
out this entire time I never should have been a C-31.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really horrible. And because of S3, my daughter recently got her status, thank God. And in this time of pretend Indian, I guess it
Yeah.
really matters now. And I
Yeah.
think that's really horrid because here we have massive amounts of 60 scoop people, or worse, my
Mhm.
family that was just like, shh,
Yeah.
don't
I'm
talk about it.
status. I didn't even know I was status. I didn't. So this is how colonized I was coming up, understanding what Indigenous identity meant. So when I grew up, so I started running away at the age of 10, and I ended up out on the streets between 12 and a half, 13, 14 years old. And I stayed out on the streets of Edmonton. And because most of the people out there were of Indigenous heritage, it, it wasn't something that I don't know, it wasn't in the forefront because I was an addict. I was an intravenous drug user and a like everything. I drank so much and just due to the trauma and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't find out that I was status till after I turned 18. And then I think even then, because I was homeless for so long, like that wasn't one of my big things. I didn't even know who I belonged to. I didn't know what treaty I was from. I didn't know what band I was from. And I can't remember how it happened that I think because I have brothers that I didn't grow up with, obviously, and they passed on due to addiction. And
Sorry.
they're like, yeah, you're Mikisu, you're Mikisu. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
Like it,
Yeah.
it wasn't so it being so prevalent now to me is that so I talked at Recovery Day a little bit on, there's no right way or wrong way to be Indigenous, but the thing about that is that I didn't know, like, what I mean? I
I
didn't
didn't know.
know.
I
Yeah,
literally had a card when in 1995, and it
yeah,
said Yellowknives Day, and I had no
yeah,
idea what that meant.
yeah,
No
yeah,
idea whatsoever. I was
yeah,
told by my white dad and my white family that I wasn't like one of those natives, and that
yeah.
like
And I
negative
was one of
things.
those natives.
Yeah, I know, but
I
just
was
negative stereotypes and tropes, like you were
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
and that's not who
Well,
we are.
no, no. And the thing about it is that exactly the systemic racism, like
Yeah,
Canada is built on a system meant to kill us. Like it's still active, the Indian Act, right?
yep,
For me going through I went through over 20 different foster homes. I was, I went through so much trauma in those foster homes. Like all of my medicine wheel was taken away. So like these things about I just recently got my child file, and it said there at the age of 4 that I was being told, they put me in a home where it said this dirty fucking Indian, pardon my language. That's how they were treating me, and beating me and treating me some way at the age of 4,
Yeah, what a
you
bunch of
know?
fucking assholes. Honestly,
Yeah,
like I know a few folks that foster native kids, but
yeah.
between the nuns, the priests, and the foster parents, there are a lot of people that really deserve to be like taken
Oh,
care of
oh,
because
oh,
I
it's
I will
horrific.
never understand that. But as you see,
Yeah.
like today, Canada does not care about human rights
No,
violations, or
no,
people in general. So it's
no.
been a real awakening for me to go down
Yeah.
the red road and being
Hmm.
told in white schools that we believe in human rights and we are righteous and
Uh,
we believe in justice.
no,
I know,
just
I
not
know,
those people.
right?
Yeah, even like with our medical system, even now. So I'll tell you right now, Michelle, that I'm in long-term recovery. So I don't want, I have been in long-term recovery since November 3rd, 2008. Right. So and it was done, like I had a partner, but it was I did it by myself with community supports. Um, and it was so interesting, like now how it is, like everybody wants an Indian.
Yep. Yep. It's true. It is so
And
true.
it's like,
Yep.
so that child that I was, and that I was lost since I was born, and I was missing since I was born, after I got into the system, because I had, my mom had a whole bunch of brothers and sisters. I think there was like 12. Some of them died really young. And some of them didn't make it out of, residential school and stuff, but there was 12 siblings in her family. Um, I had four or five brothers that I didn't even know. I had two that I knew of, an older one and a younger one.
Yeah.
Um, but they have passed due to addictions, like this trauma just runs so deep through my family.
Hmm.
And so I think what my message is that it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter at the end of the day, is that, I talk about recovery, but I also talk about harm reduction, because
Hmm.
being out on the streets of Edmonton, the first place that I was shown actually care and connection was through Kindred House, which was a harm reduction housing. It wasn't even a housing at that time. It was just like a drop-in. Come in as you are, no matter what, no matter, if you're coming off or if you're still intoxicated, whatever, come and eat. Um, and that was my first experience with kind of like the social systems out there, because I was so used to just being um either stigmatized, ostracized out there. I didn't feel safe reaching out. How many times I was assaulted out there. I never went to the cops. Like, are you kidding me? I didn't want to, freaking do that route. And I didn't even reach out to the medical system. So
Yeah.
I've got scars all over my face from being out there, because I didn't even go to the medical system. Like this one time I was assaulted so bad you couldn't even recognize me. I got up, and I didn't go to the medical system because of the shame, the way I was treated, the systemic racism in there. And so for me, it's not hard. Okay, it's either this or that. It's not. It's that we need the whole continuum, because we're dying out there.
Yes.
And it's not for me, it's not a political stance on anything. It's just we're dying out there. There's generations that are dying. The colonialism, the genocide is still happening, and it's
Hmm.
gone through, it's going through now. It's drugs, it's the little bit of money with no education that they're it's like another wave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I remember reading the National Inquiry and just reading how, the foster care system was such a pipeline to death. And I had witnessed it so many times. And
Yeah,
it was really heartbreaking knowing that how at risk my daughter was. And I mean,
yeah,
I have felt hunted since the day I was born. My
yeah,
first memories of life are my parents like literally killing each other. And so I knew at a very young age that Indigenous women did not matter in this society.
yeah.
And watching, my aunties, my grandmas,
Hmm.
being so demonized
Oh
by,
yeah.
yeah. So
Hmm.
it's been really hard to be a proud matriarch in a time
Right.
where, you're all of these new immigrants, new Canadians, refugees are taught so many lies about us, and
Yeah,
absolutely no one cares enough to correct them. And they're
yeah.
surrounded by people who could, but they choose not to because they're,
Hmm.
racist, anti-Indigenous, biased
Hmm.
people, even if they're
Hmm.
people of color. So
Hmm.
it's been really difficult. And then, of course, in the queer community, having so much anti-Indigenous
Yeah.
bias. So, our Two Spirit are never advocated for by the queer
Nope.
community because they're so,
Yeah.
self-centered. I don't know.
Yeah. I get it. I get it. But you know what? At the end of the day, so because I'm learning my voice. I'm starting because most of my life I was, that aggressive Indigenous woman. If I had an opinion, um, that she's loud and unregulated and don't listen to her. She doesn't, matter pretty much. I was tokenized in the field that what being the only Indigenous that works inside some of these places.
Yep.
Oh, here, do this that wasn't even, founded by an Indigenous person, but run this program, blah, 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 right? Um, and so now so I didn't even realize that I was continually put into trauma
Mm-hmm.
in these places. I was continually oppressed in these places.
Yep.
I was tokenized in these places,
Yeah.
and so where where I am, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for where I am right now because I've felt I've gotten some safety, which I don't
Mm,
even know if I've ever had safety,
good.
which is wild to me
Yeah.
because I'm almost 50 years old,
Yeah.
and to finally just like being okay to say my opinion and not getting reprimanded by it, um by saying you have a right to speak your mind. That's something that is new for me as an
Yeah.
Indigenous woman, and it's a point that I'm getting over the fear because I think there's an awakening happening. I think within me, I think within some of our matriarchs is because, well, maybe it's just in me because I'm tired of being submissive. I'm tired of being this politically correct person. And oh, well, you have to be, don't speak so much because that's not, even culturally correct, right? Is that we're supposed to be demure. You're not allowed to have tattoos. You can't wear this. Don't look like that. Don't talk like that. Don't act like that. Don't laugh so loud. That's disrespectful. And I never want to be disrespectful, but I also am tired of sitting by and having my voice silenced
Yep.
by patriarchy, whether it be Indigenous or non-Indigenous,
Mm-hmm.
and how I dress and when I choose to wear my ribbon skirt today. I had a friend of mine, and I'm going to say her name, and I hope she doesn't mind. Um, it is Theodora Warrior, and she wears her ribbon skirt, and I was so impressed all the time. And she's like straight, strong, Indigenous woman, and I was like, I love that. I love that you wear your ribbon skirt all the time. Um, And she goes, I wear my ribbon skirt, and you too, Michelle, right? Like
Mm,
I've seen you, and you wear your ribbon skirt, you wear your colors, and I too, I'm coming and I'm wearing my pride, because I too, I was I'm in a but anyways, we'll get into that a different time. Um, but she goes to me, she goes, I'm wear this because my mother couldn't wear it.
yep,
My grandmother couldn't wear it. And so I started taking that stance of, what, is that my mothers and my grandmothers, they're all in the spirit world, and they walk with me every single day, and they give me teachings.
yep,
And that is indigenous. That is my culture. That is my connection, is a spiritual connection. And that's where I get my teachings from. And so today, like often if I'm asked, I absolutely will go out and I'll wear my ribbon skirt proudly. I don't even care anymore, like no, like yeah,
good.
yeah,
Um, I had a Cree come up to me one day and said, "Look, if you're going to represent our people, better start smartening up and wear your stuff with pride." And I
um,
actually did appreciate that. I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, no,
yeah,
you're right. So
yeah,
like and it's been an evolution for sure.
yeah, yeah,
So like now I'm just gonna start wearing Yellowknife Dene jackets and vests
right,
more so that I'm, representing my people. Even though I'm in
yeah,
Treaty 7 and living in Treaty
yeah,
7, I think it's important that I do those things. So
mhm,
and again, like you said, acknowledge that uh my granny and my mom, my first memories of them were with long hair. And I
mhm,
remember after my parents like almost killed each other and they
mhm.
split up, and it had been years since I had seen my mom. She finally got off the Greyhound bus to have a visit, and her hair was short, and I was
Oh,
heartbroken. So
mhm,
yeah, so but I didn't understand at that time or even until more recently
yeah,
why why so many
mhm.
natives were ashamed to have their hair long. So
Me, I'm one of them.
mhm,
I am one of them. I used to have my hair short. I would maybe do it a little bit mid to like by my shoulder blades, but I would always straighten it. I would get it layered like so that it was in prestige, because I didn't want to look like if I had it any longer like a dirty Indian. And
yeah,
I didn't know that that was one of my core beliefs, because that's what I was told so much until I got my child welfare file.
yeah,
Like I've got my child welfare file, and it is over 300 pages long. Yeah, and so understanding that now I'm, growing my hair out because of that. I haven't really sought out, too much of um too much of my ancestry. Like I have some of it, but a lot of it was lost.
yeah,
And I don't know really who I can go to seek that out. And I don't know right now if I'm ready to go down that way, because being 60 scoop, I'm shy to talk to and ask questions, especially because we're still healing from all that horrible residential school, like especially my family and stuff. And when I say my family, I say my adopted in family. Like I have my auntie who wasn't, she's adopted me in, but she's not my auntie by blood. And my uncle, my one uncle that is alive, he's not around, and he's still he travels the cultural road, a spiritual road. Um, he goes with
mm,
Dakota, because we're Dene and we're part of that.
mm,
And we haven't really sat down because he's a roadman, so he's all over the place, right?
mm.
And it's
Interesting.
hard to, yeah,
Hmm.
it's really hard to connect to them because we don't know each other.
Hmm.
And he's pretty well known as a roadman, so here's this little orphan Annie over here. Hey, uncle, tell me this. And I don't know some of those protocols, right?
Hmm.
And so I don't ever want to be disrespectful to to my relatives in that way. So
Yeah.
we don't approach it. I don't approach it, right?
Mm. Well, it takes time. I know, even with my family, I remember when my one of my uncles passed, and I just asked all my family, like, what's wrong with my mom? And they really couldn't answer me. They couldn't explain what had happened, and they weren't comfortable. And that was okay. To this day, I'm okay with that because I know what's happened to my mom. But
Yeah.
it's hard to say those words out loud. At the end of the day, she's a
Uh-huh.
domestic violent
Oh yeah.
survivor. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, she had a major head injury at the time we
Yeah.
were separated. I actually thought she had died for years. And I remember
Uh-huh.
asking my dad one day, is my mom alive? And then,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and it broke his heart because he had, I had a stepmom. And so he thought, well, she should be enough. And I was like,
Yeah.
really? You think?
Yeah.
Holy shit. So,
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, I just find it really interesting how people try to justify what they did, how they did it, and
Yeah.
things at the time. So anyway, i
Even
do know
now.
i do know that if my dad didn't take me though, because like I found out during that apology from the Canadian Medical Association that the last Indian hospital closed in 1996, just like
Yeah.
the Indian residential schools. I
Yeah.
graduated high school in a white school in 1994.
Yeah.
So, I think about that and I think like if it wasn't for my dad, I probably would have been put into an Indian residential school or ended up in an Indian hospital as a
Mhm.
kid if I would have ended up with my mom. So, and again, that's a acknowledgement of proximity to whiteness. And
Mhm.
when I got older, I left the house with my husband. And although he's dark skinned, because he does have native blood in him,
Mhm.
I was always protected, whether it was with my dad, whether it
Mhm.
was with my husband, I was always kind of protected. But as soon as I'm away from both of them, I realize how scary this world is because people treat me horrid. So
Mhm.
I've definitely like believe that Indigenous women and Two-Spirit are hunted in this country, and then seeing so many of our men being murdered by the police, like it's a
Yeah.
lot. So
It
it's
is a
hard to
lot.
reconnect when the media says your uncle's this, your auntie was this, and you don't know better.
Yeah.
You don't. And then when I started reading all the volumes of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report,
Mhm.
that was
Mhm.
when I learned more about my family, about the residential school that my granny went to, and just started to understand things way differently than I did
Mhm.
before. And
Yeah.
so it took a lot of time.
I'm glad though that you took the time to do that. I know some of the calls and I understand because I've lived it, right?
Hmm.
Is that I was out there on the streets. I was exploited when I was 13 years old. So living out on the streets and being not only indigenous but being that stereotypical homeless, addicted, sex worker is that I wasn't treated right, and I couldn't not be that. So it wasn't
Yep.
I didn't have to read it,
No,
and I
you
didn't
lived
have
it. I
to get
know.
that education, yeah.
Hmm.
But the fact that you're seeking out those answers and you're so educated and versed in it and sharing your voice and understanding with everybody and being really front line and having your voice, like I really admire that about you.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely, because you're paving a path for women like me too, to come up and say that it's okay to have a voice. It's okay to share your opinion. It's okay to talk about the things that happened, you know,
Yeah.
like because our parents didn't have that choice.
And that's
They
part of
didn't
the
have that
healing.
safety.
Like I always tell people, like you can't
Yeah,
heal from trauma if you don't acknowledge it. And I
yeah,
learned that through that white
yeah,
bison sobriety or
yeah,
wellbriety course.
yeah. The
I'm
well
a
variety, yeah,
facilitator for
yeah,
the um Mending Broken Hearts. And
yeah.
that's like you take your trauma timeline, and you
Yeah.
map it out and you acknowledge all of the things
Yeah.
that have happened to you.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what I wish
That's
everybody would do.
taking the power back. That's what I did. There was a point in time when I was just so angry. I was so angry. I was so hurt and I couldn't see past it. And I almost died because of it. Because I was, for me, victim is that I sat in that trauma for so long and cloaked it on me as an identity, is that
Hmm.
this is who I am, this is all I'm gonna be, and this is where I'm gonna end. Right. And so when I crawled out of the depths of hell, um, understanding I wasn't going to build my recovery on being a victim.
Hmm.
So I would often go out and share my story out in community. I've shared my story out in schools. I talk about the benefits of harm reduction, how it applied to my life. I talk about 12 step. I talk about, there's smart recovery. There's so many different pathways to healing,
Yep.
um, that we can't just say that one's better than the other, or that my recovery is better than your recovery, because that kills people.
Yes.
It makes people not want to reach out and be part of solution because of the intimidation. Am I ever going to be like that? Am I ever going to be there? Am I worse? Is my recovery like, I've sat there and like, no, Toni, because I'm like 17 years in.
Yep.
And I'm like, I was sitting there. No, I got a solid ass recovery, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Creator, if it wasn't for ceremony, if it wasn't elders that gave me teachings. It's just when it comes out, it sounds a lot different than other people when they're doing it. So I try to really quit comparing. It doesn't work all the time because
Hmm.
of that lack of, but that self identity. Is that how I'm supposed? And then I kind of shake my head and I'm like, no, Toni, you're good.
Yep.
You're okay, Toni. Don't like stop it.
It's so
Um,
funny, Toni. I remember when one of our elders, Casey Eagle Speaker, said to me, Michelle, when somebody asks you to pray, you better. And I'm like, holy shit. Okay. So I started praying all the time when anybody would ask me. And I try to
mhm.
empower other Indigenous people. Like, it's your inherent right to do a prayer.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It
Right. So
is.
it takes time, right? It does
Yeah,
take time. So I
yeah.
feel you on all of this. And, I'm glad that like, there was a moment when I was like, oh my God, we're not the victim. We're not,
No,
we are survivors
we're
of
the
genocide in a
warriors.
post apocalyptic society.
The
And the reason
least
why,
spoken about genocide in the world.
mhm, yeah, 100%. So, like, and here we have September 30th coming up. And I'm still seeing people doing this denialism. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's so disappointing because it's like, I would never tell somebody from England their history and why they're wrong to frame it the way they frame it. I would never do that. Imagine having the
Mm.
audacity to think you can. It's insane to
Oh
me. Like, literally, I'm not trying to be ableist. I'm like,
yeah,
how do you say a lie that you so confidently believe? And
yeah,
so, but I remember when I believed that lie too, and
yeah,
how long it took me to get to the point where it was like, I'm so proud of
yeah,
my family and what they
yeah,
survived, and lying
yeah.
about, being treaty so that you could work, so that you could feed your family. Like, these are
Right?
things that give me pride now, as opposed
Yeah.
to what it was before, where I was ashamed of my skin. I was ashamed of who I was, and I didn't identify as native forever. And when anybody would ask
Mhm.
me, I'd be like, well, I'm half. I even one
Yeah.
point in time told somebody I was Italian, which is kind of funny when you think about Buffy. I know, right? What a nerd.
Oh my, you know what? I was so taken from my identity is so I was born up in Yellowknife. And so I thought when I was a child, I thought that I was Inuit. I thought I was from up north. Thought I was like dog.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I didn't even know. Like I didn't even know. I remember wanting so bad was one of those beautiful pouch jackets, that have the fur around and stuff. I didn't even know then a Cree, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to understand that identity. So I can identify with Cree because I lived in Treaty 6 for a really long time in Edmonton. And so Cree words come to me a lot easier. And
Mhm.
I think that's yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting you should say that because I didn't understand who I was or where I came from at all. Like
Yeah.
no idea. And
No.
it was really hid from us too,
Yeah.
right? So like if there was ever a book I was going to write, and I hope somebody else does, I hope it's about racism in families because,
Yeah.
whether you're partly Black, whether you're part Native, whether you're part another POC, like it is
Hmm.
hard putting up with racism within your own family. And then
Yeah.
later as an adult being basically disowned, you know,
Yeah.
it's super awful. So I have a lot of respect, mad respect for who we are, our culture, and that we are survivors of not just a genocide, but a post-apocalyptic society. So
Yeah.
now
Out of my family, I think that, like I said, I've got my uncle. My brothers passed away to addiction. My niece was murdered. My auntie was missing. So our whole family unit, any semblance, there never was that, right?
mhm,
So
I
even
feel
with
you.
that, keep educating and cherish that because some of us never had that at all,
Yeah, I
right?
feel you. I
So
feel you.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
try to teach my daughter now, which is funny.
yeah.
So she just got her status. She's blonde and blue-eyed. I remember crying when I was little. Like, I just want a blonde and blue-eyed baby if I ever have a
Aw,
baby. And now here I have one. So
yeah.
yeah, and
Mm,
she's cute as a button and
aw,
all those things. So I'm really lucky to be a mom, and there's a lot of
yeah,
intergenerational healing
yes.
because I was
Oh,
able to keep her.
yeah.
But we did have racism at the Peter Lougheed. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, my husband and I
I
wanted
got
to have more
told,
kids.
get this. So my daughter had to have a one of those gallbladder removal because she had really gallbladder. So she was at the doctor's and then they gave her really strong pain meds and they had provided me with a naloxone kit, which I know how to do. I'm trained in that also. But status, we can get the nose spray. I went to the pharmacist at Foothills and I said, like my daughter didn't even take them anyways, but either way, I was like, can I trade the needle one for the spray? I was told point blank, oh, we don't have those in Alberta. I was like, really?
Yeah, I
That's
know.
interesting.
I've seen like I've posted a lot of TikToks about the racism that I
Are
get
you
for
kidding
getting
me?
these. Like I get these once a week, 7 boxes. And the racism I
Yeah,
experience is just stupid. And
yeah.
and I always think like if I'm a, sober, housed,
What?
suburban mom being mistreated like this, how
Mhm.
are people who
I
are in active addiction
The
supposed to get
first
help?
time, the first time I tried to get a free naloxone kit because I was working in harm reduction, I tried to go get it, and I did. They said, "So, what do you use drugs?" And I said, "I don't. I'm clean and sober." And they go, "Well, you have to identify as a drug user to be able to get this." I didn't know that I didn't know my rights. And so I was like, okay, well, if that's what I got to do, fine. Then I'm an opioid user. Give me my free naloxone, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's on my medical, I guess now.
Yeah, well, but they like again, it's one of those things that you said in order to gain access to medical treatment that you should have had without a question. I've
Yeah.
actually looked at the Alberta College of Pharmacy's like complaint form, and it's 20 pages, and you have to make the complaint against the actual pharmacist. And the first
Mhm.
time it happened, it was a brown man, and I didn't want that to be on his record. Like I wanted to submit it for systemic changes. but
Yeah.
they wouldn't do it that way. So I just never bothered. And so I just started making TikToks about how shitty and racist Albertans are who are pharmacists. And, I know that my second place, they pay attention to my TikToks, but I think it's important that people understand how systemic racism actually works. And just because we're allowed access to one of those a day doesn't mean we can get it. And I have
No.
to fight really hard. And I have post-traumatic stress from it because it's
Uh-huh.
just constant. And the other thing is too is that like you were talking about being loud and such, like it is an injustice. We are being
Uh-huh.
mistreated. We have
Uh-huh.
oodles of reports to prove it. So we have
Uh-huh.
every right to be like, actually, that's against my human rights. Actually, that's against my treaty rights. Actually, I can make a complaint because, and here's a piece of paper to show you. You aren't supposed to ask people their names. You're not supposed to ask them if they're in active addiction. And how
Uh-huh.
many white people that I've educated on this will go and get naloxone kits and never, never, never have an issue, never be asked
No.
their
They
name.
told me to identify as,
Yep.
and I didn't know
Yeah.
at that time. And so that's probably on my medical record somewhere that I'm an opioid user.
Well, then we should update it and say that you had to lie in order to access those,
Yeah.
life-saving drugs that you can't
Right.
misuse.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I. So yeah, do you want to tell me a bit about the work you do today?
So I'm an addiction counselor. I've been working in the mental health and addiction field since actually 2012. I started my journey at one of the in-talk shelters down there. That's quite the journey. But it was the catalyst for me to go back to school to get my education so that I could. Yeah, it's been quite a wild ride in the field. But I won't ever give up because that's a piece of my heart is that I try to bring in the 12-step plus culture daily basis to our relatives that are trying to come out of addiction and trying to stop that cycle. It can be quite heartbreaking work and it could be absolutely amazing work too. Like it's front line, I'm front line, I'm right there. And just, you know, putting my hand out to help our relatives, you know.
Amazing.
Like I said, yeah, we're there's a whole generations that are getting wiped out right now
Yeah.
from the opioid crisis to, you know, the methamphetamines to whatever it is, whatever it is now is that we're getting wiped out by it.
Yeah, I know. I try to tell people, and I swear to God, it just goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah,
So
there's no care. Like
I know.
you know, like the old saying, like there's some, oh my gosh, yeah.
And that's why like I always push a pharmacist because they might be a an asshole for whatever reason, but that
Yeah,
medicine can save a life. And I will
it,
fight
yeah,
them for that medicine rather than,
yeah,
be demure,
no, yeah,
because it
no,
doesn't work. We have
no,
to take care of each other. We have to do that community support.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've been, like I said, I've been frontline since 2012. I've been, like I said, in talk shelter. I was working in harm reduction housing. I worked in abstinent based. It's always been mental health and addictions for me because I think for me is I there's like the immense lived experience that I have as a woman that lived on the street for
Yep.
over 20 years, the trauma that came with that, but also the strength it took to come out of that, and to get educated and to be part of the solution and to try and help my brothers and sisters in any way, like whether it be in harm reduction, whether it be abstinent based, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that respect and dignity should be given to everybody. And I think from my lived experience, and the way that I am, so I also have FASD.
Mm,
I have like complex PTSD, anxiety, all of the fun mental health that goes along with it. But to give that strength, hope, and courage to somebody that is so stuck in their brain right now, I can't do this, I can't get over this day, I can't make it, I can't, and just sitting down and having an honest conversation is that, we can do hard things. We
yeah,
can do hard things. And, at the end of the day is that there's purpose for you, and you are worthy of love and respect and dignity just the way that you are. You don't have to, and if this is what you want, I'm here to walk beside you in that journey, whatever that looks like, right? And I've been doing it for over 10 years now, quietly in the background, which is so wild to me that yeah,
I'm glad.
yeah,
I'm grateful.
yeah.
I'm grateful we know each other. I'm grateful you want to come on the podcast. I'm immensely like proud of what you've had to survive in order to be here right now. So I just
Yeah,
hope you know from one sister to another, like to me, you matter. What you're doing
thank
matters.
you.
And this is going to be the difference because the biggest thing I've learned too is like I grew up with me and my people being dehumanized.
Yeah,
But now that I'm older and have unpacked all of this, I understand now. And so, like, you can be anywhere and see one of our brothers or sisters, give them a little bit of dignity, and
yes,
and they're
yes,
wonder like they're so grateful.
absolutely.
It's funny because Calgarians like, oh my God, it's so dangerous everywhere, blah blah blah. And it's like, it's not dangerous for me. It's not dangerous for me
No,
because I give
no,
people, Narcan. I'm kind to them.
right?
But you're so afraid and have dehumanized my people that of course you're afraid now. And it sucks because um, these are people who deserve all the love that you give them every single day. So I'm grateful
Yeah,
you're on those front lines. And I'm
yeah.
grateful you were willing to come here and share your story. Where do people
Mhm.
find you if they want to talk to you?
I'm at Sunrise Healing Lodge.
Nice. Nice. Well, we
Yes.
will put the link for Sunrise Healing Lodge in our preamble for this conversation. And is there anything else you'd like to add for today's episode?
Nothing other than thank you so much for inviting me. Keep
I'm
doing
honored.
the work that you were doing. Like again, I'm so honored to have been here. Did you see my awesome shirt though?
It's freaking amazing. It's freaking amazing. What does it say for friends who can't see it?
Oh my goodness. It is prisons are state of violence framework, political, changing, justice, transformation, social economic rights, um, defeating the system, oppression, all that good stuff.
Right on. No, and that's just it. Like when you realize who you are and where you come from, you're proud, like the proudest native. And so I'm
Mhm,
really honored you come on. Please know you're welcome back anytime you have like a new initiative or something you want to talk about.
mhm.
Always back for more. And just know that I'm in solidarity with all of the great work you're doing. I pray
Aw,
and pray and pray that people will start showing some compassion to us as people and and change this. It's really crazy to me that we're 10 years almost of
yeah,
TRC and
yeah,
people still don't even see us as humans, let alone
yeah,
advocate for this drug
mhm,
poisoning and understanding the root cause being trauma. So
yeah.
we just got to keep working as people and help each other, and that's all we can
Let's
do.
come together, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and have those, somebody. And again, I think this was Theodora because I just love her.
we all
Um,
do.
right? She was going, I said, this ally, he's just amazing. Like Sunrise has been amazing, like I said, for my healing journey and having my voice elevated and actually, honoring that voice. It's been so component to my like healing journey, self-healing journey. But there's a particular male that always lifts me up and brings me to, brings me to the table, right? And my friend Theodora, she goes, I said, yeah, he's a great ally. And she's like, that's not an ally. That's, oh, what did she say? It was like, that's your partner in crime or something like that. Like it wasn't an ally, but that's like your relative. That's your bro. That's somebody that's got you. Like that's beyond like, and because he's doing the work, and
Yeah.
the work is getting done behind the scenes, and our voices are becoming elevated, and it's so needed because it is beyond allyship when you find somebody that wants to bring our voices to the forefront and is okay sitting, behind and elevating us. And I felt that, and I've had it happen, and it's happening more and more. So I
Yeah.
really want to also focus on that part too, is that change is being made, even though it might be a little bit slower. It's women like you, it's women like me, it's like the women that have come before us, is that we just need to keep bringing our voice forward and honoring that in that good way, right? Yeah.
100%. We are on the shoulders of giants, and I'm
Yes.
honored to do that. So, I can't thank you enough for being on here. I'm going to give some resources. I don't want you to hesitate to jump in and ask questions or add to what I'm saying because, yeah, I think like some people listen, but I don't know if they hear it. And then, I'll say little jokes in between, and I don't think people get it, but maybe.
Mhm.
And then sometimes people come up to me in real life and will say, I'm so glad the Reconciliation Action Group called out this or said something about this and that you said this. And it's like, I know
Mhm.
it matters because
Yeah.
we help grow our community to feel human, be seen, and advocate for them in a good way. So I just hope
Mhm.
like I'm so in solidarity in any way I can be, and happy to elevate anything that you need me to elevate. And hopefully, a few so called treaty partners, so called folks interested in reconciliation, will start amplifying your voice, my voice, these
Mhm.
voices that
Yes.
are
Yes.
are calling out the issues and giving
Mhm.
solutions. That's the other part. Like
Yeah.
I always tell people, it's not from a lack of solutions, it's just a lack
Yeah.
of political willpower. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
thanks, Toni.
Thank
So,
you.
for folks interested, we have the Indigenous Book Club. As you can see behind me, I have Wab Rice's book about turning leaves. That's our next book club. The Reconciliation Action Group, please follow them. Please amplify our voice. And if you are a settler with good intentions, please join us. We've had a few settlers who, we have some issues with understanding that they're supposed to elevate our voice, but whatever reconciliation looks like to you, maybe you should be a part of our group if you're local. I'm proud this podcast gives solutions, including cultural safety training or cultural first aid, in all of them to create a safe space for Indigenous, people of color, those with disabilities, and to us LGBTQ to speak. According to the 2023 Quality of Life Report from the Calgary Foundation, 88% of racialized Calgarians feel uncomfortable or out of place because of their religion, ethnicity, skin color, culture, language, accent, gender, or sexual orientation, up from 75% the year before. So I think that Toni and I talked about how uncomfortable we feel in this society because of our culture. 84% of racialized Calgarians believe that racism still exists, as versus 66% of non-racialized Calgarians. So tell you what, folks, I'll work on the other 16% to get that to 100. But you got to work on 34% to get that up to 100. Thank you to Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, Alicia Fritkin of here to help.bc.ca. They have a whole vision area with Indigenous people and what is Indigenous cultural safety and why I should care about it. That work are cultural action tools. So please support Indigenous work as part of your reconciliation work and settler understanding. I'm just lucky enough to highlight and repeat them here. Do's and don'ts for bystander intervention. So had the folks at the carriage house intervened, maybe looked at this, maybe we wouldn't have, unfortunately, another lost brother. You can go to afsc.org and go to the resource files where they have do's and don'ts for bystander intervention. Internalized racism or lateral violence is another form of violence Indigenous and marginalized folks experience by the structure of racism imposed on these lands. You can go to Donna Bevan's amazing website, racialequitytools.org. She has tons of resource files, including a section on what is internalized racism. And it's not little. So whenever you have that anger, that brain dysfunction, whatever, from a horrid racist thing that had happened, first of all, remember that's racial battle fatigue. And two, don't gaslight yourself. Go to resources like this and empower yourself. I wish anyone who follows me on social media would watch the anti-racism organizational lead for the city of Calgary giving a committee presentation on the journey of becoming an anti-racism leader. Literally, all of us need to do this work, myself included. Calgary Black Lives Matter activists, Taylor McNally, Adora Noford, are being legally targeted, as now our friends in the Justice for Palestinian. So you can go to Stop the Stack YYC to learn more about anti-Blackness in the city and how to support folks like Taylor, Adora, and of course, follow Justice for Palestine, Independent Voices for, or Independent Jewish Voices. And on Instagram, that's where the kids are, all the students are at. So go to the watermelon stuff. I share it all the time. Go follow them. Indigenous people have been talking about our issues, sharing our traumas in reports, commissions, and public hearings, just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties, listen to politicians and their platforms and policies. If they don't recognize treaties or marginalized people with their budget for gender equity plus, if they're cutting violence prevention programs and services like Rona Ambers did with the Sisters in Spirit Vigil, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay-straight alliances, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, and folks with disabilities, know that your vote is directly negatively impacting folks that are on the streets or dealing with horrible, horrible oppression. Demand they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, the recommendations from the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reform reports about child welfare reform, and the violence prevention. Now we have 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And because we've had 9 Indigenous people murdered by police across this country, please have a look at the June 2022 report on systemic racism in policing. Again, it's not like we don't have the answers. It's just that we don't have politicians willing to implement them. Provincially, we have 113 pathways to justice. Municipally, we have the White Goose Flying Report. Denying these reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism in justice, educational, health, colonial institutions, and more, with multiple reports that say the same thing. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand treaty partnership, colonialism, racism, privilege, and sexism, they have zero business running. Jennifer Johnston. This should be understood by all parties, local politicians, but community organizations like the Canadian Medical Association, Sports Club, like look at Pride Tape, Google articles on how non-Indigenous Canadians can become allies, because there's tons of that. The Calgary Foundation has a wonderful ally toolkit as well. I see non-Indigenous only share police sources when it comes to missing people. That's your anti-Indigenous bias. If you're not following aboriginalalert.ca, if you're not signed up with them, if you're not following Missing Children Society of Canada, you are not understanding we don't trust the police enough to even share our own children being missing. But we do trust these organizations. When you don't share them, I feel you're a racist. Demand urgent action to protect the lives of Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse people experiencing homelessness. Go to womenshomelessness.ca. Obviously, Toni and I talked about the over 10,000 deaths since 2016, over 2,000 deaths in 2013. There are wonderful people that you can follow. I follow Ewan Thompson today, out of all days. Him and a bunch of folks from the pro-Palestinian marches were actually calling out the police for how they were being treated. But he has practiced harm reduction as a businessman forever. And he does have a PhD. So I know for all you folks who are like stupid Indigenous women, I know you like white men with PhDs. If you or someone you know is using substances, please don't use alone. If you are using alone, you can contact the National Overdose Response Service at 888-688-NORS for support, or download the Brave or Doors or Lifeguard apps. These are plans, safety plans, because you matter. And we want you to stay here, just like Toni so eloquently said repeatedly throughout this place. I also strongly support Freedom's Path Recovery Society.ca, where you can donate. They provide free one-on-one addictions counseling services, group treatment in recovery for Calgary, are queer-friendly and anti-racist. As many of you heard, I fully support Canada's first 2S LGBTQ addiction recovery center, stonewallrecovery.ca. I'm hoping next time I'll be wearing all of their gear because it's coming in the mail. One last thing. We talked about the Narcans. Please, everyone should have a naloxone kit or Narcan sprays with them at all times, like you would a Band-Aid. You never know when you're going to see somebody who's blue and not breathing any longer, and that medicine helps them breathe. At the very minimum, if somebody comes up to you, rather than being a scared panties, you can actually just give them a kit, and then they will likely say thank you and take it. If you're experiencing emotional distress after anything we talked about today and want to talk, you can call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 855-242-3310. It is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they also have a website, hopeforwellness.ca. And if more related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, you can call 844-413-6649. We talked a bit today about being a 60 Scoop, and there's the 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta at ssisa.ca. The Indian Residential School Survivor and Family Hotline is 866-925-4419. The Kids Help Phone is 1-800-668-6868. You can also text at 686868. And they also have a live chat from 7 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. The Native Youth Crisis Hotline is 877-209-1266. The Youth Line no longer exists for the LGBT, but you can text at 847-694-4275 or go to youthline.ca for more folks. For non-Indigenous people, there are usually distress center lines in your area, a functioning 211, and the new national number of 988, where you can also text 988, or you can go to 988.ca. The following are 2S LGBT crisis supports available in most areas. I want to give a shout out to Toronto. I did share this on my social media. The crisis response pilot that's being led by the Two-Spirited people of First Nations in partnership with 2 other organizations. All you do is call 211 if you're in that area. But if you want to find out more and model that, you can go to the number 2 spirits.org and find out more. Also, my American friends, thank you for listening. To my global friends, I can't believe you listened to me. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear our voice. The Two-Spirit identity in the States is the strongheartshelpline.org. You can call 844-7-NATIVE or 844-762-8433. Itgetsbettercanada.org has tons of resources. for our 2S LGBTQ community, but just a warning for the BIPOC, because I've seen some orgs in Canada or in Alberta listed, and not all of them practice anti-racism nor have Indigenous education. So you may feel more comforted by the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit line. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. It is self-care, how I take my power back. It's why I started the podcast, to speak freely without interruption, without tone police, without leadership shaming, without gaslighting questions, as many people don't want to hear Indigenous opinions, but sure like to tell their uninformed ones. They know nothing about us. Colonialism, the constant surveillance of our people, our protests, our vigils, and our rights. I and many others share daily racism, so it's just unacceptable anymore. Learn about being trauma informed. That means that people with trauma might not be like, oh my God, thank you so much for being my savior. You're going to be like, fuck you. And that's okay, because you're trauma informed. So you're going to be kind to people who are exhibiting trauma. Ugh. Folks like me are actually dealing with internalized racism, gatekeeping, and folks that survive off the status quo. There are other people who are so in their trauma that they, stop people from doing the work and deplete personal resources. Internal and external racism is an everyday reality for me, Indigenous folks, folks with disabilities, QT BIPOC, and more. Masicho to my ancestors, to my granny, my mom, of what strength looks like through your example. I want to thank my white father for teaching me to be strong and blunt, my stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family. And it is through her I am a second-generation Calgarian. Thank you to my husband for producing and editing the show, on top of being my husband, my childhood friend, father of our child, and support down my journey of the Red Road. He has witnessed decades of racism and sexism. And to our child, who we are blessed to learn from daily, we are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better, stronger person. I hope my daughter and my family will be proud in the future of us discussing these present day issues in a way that they'll understand. I honor the Blackfoot and the elders, as the members have been so kind to me on helping me unpack my Red Road. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Blackfoot, and Leonard Kenny taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies to the elders, language keepers, as I try to learn proper pronunciation from this southerner. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, humbly, Mossy Cho, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, because I wish you knew how it lifts my spirit. There are days I'm like, why am I doing this? And then I get an email and I remember. So thank you. I also have a YouTube channel. You can go and subscribe. You can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. The last thing I'd like to talk about is just how much I appreciated being invited to the Pod Summit. Today, out of all days, I had a screaming headache, so I couldn't go back. But, just reflecting on how wonderful it was to hang out with Kels from Queer in Alberta, a previous guest, and just be able to be inspired again by so many other podcasters. And a story that really my husband and I keep reflecting on is Jeremy Saunders from Sick Boy podcast. CBC carries it, and he has CF, and he talks about his journey and other people's journey of sickness. And I guess he has a Google Doc. So if you have a sickness you want to talk about, you can put your stuff in there and he'll pick you. So I just wanted to let folks from the Pod Summit know I did appreciate going, and I met some wonderful folks, including Camille from the disability community, and she was telling us about theater that's done with folks with disabilities, for folks with disabilities, and of course all the rest of us should just be paying all the monies and supporting it. So I just wanted to throw that out to you. And as always, I end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not for dish. My beautiful cousin would respond, or you'd be in my dish. Thanks again, folks, for listening.